what I had is Mr. Anjos. I don't know. Say whatever you want to say. Well, I think you should eat some shit about Call of Duty. I think we should definitely start with that.
So I'll say this about Call of Duty. For those just tuning in, I suggested or predicted, however you want to frame it, that Call of Duty historically has always been the best-selling game of the year. That being said, from at least Circana, and also which has been boasted by people at EA themselves, that remains the standing narrative. The reason why that holds some credence is that Activision and even Microsoft have yet to dispute that. Therefore, the best-selling game of the year of last year quite possibly could be not Call of Duty.
No, hold on. Just like put the gun back in the holster. Okay. All right.
5 hours in.
Same thing. Oh, 5 hours. Wow.
I need a beer too.
This game is going to ship early next year from Bungie, and this is the first time anybody has ever seen it. It's the first time they've debuted it.
The original Doom was a really significant jump in gaming technology for the time.
And there's one more thing we'll bring to Battlefield.
I've got a chainsaw. I had to fight for that.
Programming mods are building their own levels in Unreal.
For Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty, entirely new Call of Duty,
Call of Duty, Call of Duty. One of the fascinating new additions to your squad is a dog.
Hey, is that about ready? These things, they take time.
Boom! Shooter Monthly, episode 4, the podcast that is never out of bullets. There's 4 of us. We're back. We're here. Anjos has arrived to take a double tap into what remains of Call of Duty Black Ops 7, which I'm sure we'll be hearing about. Highguard is something that I think everyone who listens to this podcast is going to know more about. What is the take that we got? How is it doing? And then a very interesting Matthew Ball tweet with our favorite shooter creator, Mr. Cliff Blazinski. What is the biggest shooter in the world is something that I think if you are listening to this podcast right now, I want you to think in your head, what is the shooter that has the highest MAU? I think you're going to be surprised at our answer. But before we get to any of that, let's go around and introduce our wonderful co-hosts. I'm Philip Black. I am former DICE, Amazon Games, Game Concepts Consulting. I am joined today by Mr. Chris Anjos.
Well, hello, Christopher Anjos here, formerly EA, formerly Activision, formerly Tencent, currently Director of Product and Strategy at Publish, and handing it off to Mr. Sides.
Yeah, I'm Chris Sides, formerly Bungie, former EA. I think all of us are, I think half the industry is former EA at this point. And I do consulting with Seaside's gaming consulting, as well as my own indie company called Grey Goat Gaming. We have our first game coming out called Jimmy Jumps. It's a throwback to this game called Jumpman, which was an old Commodore 64 title. And we're working on our next one right now.
Link in the episode description.
Yeah, thank you. I'll send it over to Feras.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Feras Musmar, ex-DICE, so ex-EA as well, like everyone on this podcast. Ex-Gameloft, around 17, 18 years in the industry. Worked on mobile, AAA, AA games, and currently product director at TTK Games in Sweden.
Let's talk about the thing everyone wants to talk about. Release of the week. I don't know, maybe the first big one of 2026. Highguard from Wildlight Entertainment is out. It came out on January 26th. It has had a very interesting intro into the industry with, I would say, some highs and some lows. Mr. Chris Anjos, could you talk about what this is? Like, what is Highguard? Why do we care about this?
So we care about Highguard because it is, in my opinion, one of several games outright, not even out. It's currently still in beta, I believe. It is playable by anyone who has a Steam account and anyone who has a current generation console. We should care about Highguard because it and another game, Deadlock, represents of a space in shooters that I classify as MOBA/raid shooters, meaning they're kind of like hero shooters. They have shooting elements. There's lane control, there's roles, and there's objectives, and there's emergent metagame in every session. The day that Highguard released, which was 2 days ago, we're filming this on a Wednesday. So on the Monday of this week, a random Monday, Highguard on Steam alone had almost 6 figures of concurrent players on Steam alone. At the same time, the same window, another unreleased game, Deadlock, which is only available on early access or closed beta invites, also had nearly 100,000 concurrent players for the release of its character. So that suggests to me strongly that there is a lot of excitement and desire and demand for games like this. And FYI, I know of at least 3 games in development right now that are also looking to release games targeting this specific space of, again, what I describe as MOBA/raid shooters. So the raid shooters is identified by Highguard by themselves. That's how they classify themselves. For anyone who has not played Highguard, every session has multiple phases. Think Rainbow Six, think even Fortnite or Rust, resource gathering, think capture the flag type game modes, almost like Blood Gulch in Halo. And then think search and destroy from either a Call of Duty or a Counter-Strike. So, by the way, has everyone here played Highguard?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm very just full disclosure, I am very excited about what I've seen from Highguard thus far. There are moments where the fun is very pronounced. There are moments that I would describe as downtimes, and whatever reviews, negative or positive, that we see on Steam, there's a lot of, I am very bullish that whatever we're seeing now is a strong skeleton of what the game can be as it gears up towards launch. I could go deeper if you guys would care to hear more.
But yeah, I just have a couple of thoughts there.
Please.
Yeah, calling it beta early access is kind of altering the narrative, I feel. It's being a little bit too soft. I don't think that they announced that this was the early access version of the title. Granted, it does feel like an early access game. I agree with you there, but I don't think that's the way that the narrative was ran. Do tend to agree that like this genre is becoming something. There's something here, right? I think FPS players, maybe I'm speaking too much about myself, but like we've all played what kind of feels like similar FPSs over the last, 10 years. And so it is nice to see a new genre trying to emerge and trying to do something different. I really appreciate that about Highguard. I do think their execution is relatively flawed in a few different areas. But this is a launch. And I think even the perspective of it being an early access is kind of pointing to some of the issues that it's running into. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about that because I don't think this is being driven as an early access title.
So
it's interesting. It's not marked as that on Steam. That's the other thing I would point
it's not.
out.
Like this is their launch.
So go ahead, Feras.
Yeah, I think this actually adds to a couple of things that make this game unusual. Like, I think the way it got released to the market is an interesting one because I understand why a lot of people will be under the impression that this is an early access or a beta because this game didn't do any tech tests or play tests before, which is very unusual in the last couple of years for any shooter to just drop out like this without having multiple playtests. So I can understand the perception of it being an early access or beta because it's going to need a lot of balancing to get on the way, especially that this game. So I was kind of excited for Highguard in a way because I felt it was unfair the way the game was treated. So I wanted to be on its side when it came out. But after playing it, I think there's a couple of things that they'll need to balance out a bit. I think it's trying a bit too many different elements at the same time. So, for example, I was surprised with the amount of weapons that exist, even though you have a lot of different heroes, versus when you look at a game as Deadlock, they took a lot of the MOBA elements, but then simplified it by not having a lot of weapons being applied to each hero in that game, which made it accessible to, I guess, MOBA players versus shooter players. I think this game is trying to take too much of the both elements in one go. Also, for anyone who's played the tutorial, they really focused on the armor so much that made me feel like the armor is going to be the most important thing ever, that I forgot every other part of the tutorial. This is like a minor one, but I just like, because playing with my friend and me and him were like just freaking out about like the armor in that game. But I think two things that I found really unusual about the game is the way it dropped without a lot of tech playtesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part is the amount of design elements it's trying to blend together without testing it with the community. So they took a very, very brave move. And I think they're going to need some time to balance stuff out. This is my take. But Anjos, you seem to be like more bullish on this game. So I want to hear more about like the things you really like about it.
So the things I really like about it, namely, are again, what I would call downtime phases is the first phase where you start defensing up your base, taken from Rainbow Six Siege, less robust as Rainbow Six Siege, but clearly inspired by that part of Rainbow Six Siege. This phase after that is also, I would consider, a downtime where you're going out in the world. You may be opening chests, resource gathering. Maybe you may hit some geodes for resources. Another downtime that I wish you could, I hope they look to condense. By the time you actually start fighting other players, you could be 5 minutes into the match. So 5 minutes of downtime into the session. I would like to see that either condensed highly or maybe even removed. I don't think they added much to the overall session engagement. The fun really starts hitting once you're on your mount. You're playing a version of Capture the Flag, which I think is very timeless. I got strong memories and flashbacks from Halo 2 on that, on the Warthog with your friends fighting. So where the game really shines is in combat. So the more combat you have, the better. Perhaps in those early 2 phases, adding in PvE elements, getting you into using the guns and getting into the action would be a boon. And I realized talking to you, I just described Battleborn. Remember Battleborn?
Oh, long live Battleborn, baby.
Battleborn was ahead of its time, man. So it's funny. Like this is gonna be a fun one. So the fun is there. At least I see the fun as it is. It just requires some tuning. There's also the makeup of the current iteration of the game, which is 3v3. 2 teams of 3v3 in a huge map. That map is huge. And in those previous phases, you could go through all of that without seeing another player or even finding your gun. That can and should be adjusted. Can it be adjusted with more teams, like 3v3v3, or bigger teams of 4v4 or 5v4, perhaps? That being said, as you mentioned, Feras, there's only 8 characters currently in the game, which means if they do go that direction, they would have to make the design decision of, are we okay with having multiple mirror matches of the same characters per session? Also, on top of that, there's also support type class characters in the game. That being said, the 3v3 format really pushes players to focus on the meta of DPSers. I don't need support classes. The meta to win the game or a match is going to be 3 damage dealing type of characters. So some tuning is required there. So the later phases, from Capture the Flag type phases to the mounts, very strong, to the raid, to the base raiding sections where you're actually fighting players head on with quick respawns. The game is very good. There's something there that can be built upon. But to get there, we have to go through long swaths of downtime, which can be addressed. And also, on top of that, an X factor here for us and everyone here, the team is very good. Everything I'm telling you, I'm sure they know already, but in case they don't know, here's some free work for you guys.
A couple of things there. Like, I agree on the Capture the Flag part. My kind of problem there is, like, Capture the Flag is a mode, not like a game. And so, you know, when you talk about Halo 2, it's like, yeah, it had, or Halo, any Halo, it had Capture the Flag, and that was fun, but that was a mode of many different modes in the multiplayer. And so it's a little bit challenging, I feel, to really make this an entire game. If this was a mode within something else, I think it would probably have a little bit less kind of pressure put on it.
Hold on. Hold on, Chris. Hold on.
Yeah.
I can't let you get away with that. That was the same shit people said about Battle Royale. I heard that shit forever. Oh my god, Battle Royale. It's just a mode. It's not a genre. And then everyone was.
When did you hear that? When PUBG like launched to like 1 million concurrent players? Like, what are you talking about?
That was one of the early pieces of feedback. People were pushing back against the spread of Battle Royale, saying, "Hey, is this actually a mode or is it a genre?"
I think there's a question if it's a mode or a genre, but I think Capture the Flag is clearly a mode.
But this isn't. So I think the thing we touched on at the top of the hour, and I think this is really important when we look at the high level split in what's happened in first person shooters, is that there's been genre evolution, right? Like, no one is building an arena shooter anymore. Long live Splitgate. And so we're trying to figure out what is the next evolution after Battle Royale, and we'll talk about it. I think the biggest shooters in the world, but it's basically Battle Royale and tactical shooters. That's the landscape right now. Those are your 2 options. That is like what 90% of the market. And so the dark horses are extraction shooters, right? We're talking about Arc and where that goes. Arc Raiders, if that goes anywhere, and all the bodies along the way. But the counter thesis to me is that extraction shooters are all about out of round meta. Everything is about you leaving the round, upgrading your gear, and then going back in. This is a counter-cyclical thesis to that, where everything is about in-round progression, right? That's what Anjos was talking about, is
emergent
that
metagame.
You have these long... Yeah, you're building up in-round currency, right? Inside of the game. That's what those build-up phases are about. You're going to an in-game shop to purchase items or upgrades that are used within the context of the round that evaporate at the end of the round, right? It's all about that in-round progression and build-ups. So there's power scaling within the round. And that, to me, is the exact opposite of extraction shooters. And I think that's where Battle Royale actually succeeded in advancing, right? Is when you play, for instance, Apex Legends, there's literal power progression in, for instance, the armor, right? You have some armor that has 1 health bar, another has 2, another has 3, that has 4. Remember, they've even pushed this farther with crafting currency, which is another way you can get high tier items. This to me is taking that idea to its maxima point, which is moving more in the MOBA direction, similar to Deadlock. Like that to me is what, at a high level, I would argue this represents, is still the search for what comes after Battle Royale. And so that to me feels like there's a whole lot of meat on the bone. And I think it's not accurate to say it's just capture the flag. That is one part of the loop, but the in-round progression is a dramatic change from, for instance, playing capture the flag in Halo.
I would agree that it is a change from like Halo or capture the flag in typical modes. I find like the in-round progression for sure is something different. And yeah, absolutely, extraction shooters are more about the meta progression rather than the in-round progression. But I don't see how Highguard actually provides that real sense of progression, because if I'm progressing, so's the other team. And so ultimately it is the same level of progression fighting the same level of progression. There's not really a clear way like in MOBAs where you have like this whole economy tied to it, right? Like the economy part of Highguard is not nearly as deep as something like a MOBA. And so the in-round progression in MOBAs is critical. You're if you're watching any league game, it's the amount of currency per hour, or not per hour, but per minute or whatever it is. Highguard's depth of progression is relatively shallow. So like I do agree that that is an important part, and that's something interesting about trying to do something different here. But I don't find that Highguard actually hits nearly the level of progression or the economies that you would see in a MOBA.
You hit on something critical their sides. Everything that Highguard is trying to do, and other games do it or execute it better. For example, its build or defense phase is a more shallow version than what is in Rainbow Six Siege. Its resource gathering phase is an iteration that is not as strong as you see in Fortnite. But where it does, I think, exceed quote unquote competitors is in the capture the flag mode, and perhaps in its base raiding mode, which again I classify as downtimes versus stronger positions. And I would also count its emergent progression as MOBA-esque with everything you described, but executed in a way that is not as strong in other MOBAs.
I almost feel that's kind of like, I'm a selfish gamer. I want Highguard to be good. I love FPSs. I want all of them to be good because I want to play more FPSs. But just looking at it from a further perspective, it seems like it is doing a lot of these different things, just none of them very well. It's trying to have an economy. It's trying to have these MOBA areas. And even the base defending and stuff, I guess, is fun, but it's not really as deep as something you would see in like a League or a Dota or even a Deadlock. Like it's not there yet. And so it does really feel sanitized in a strange way where the game feels like it's meant to be extremely competitive, yet it also feels extremely sanitized. And there feels like there's a mismatch there that it's kind of hard for me to articulate, but it's just like the feeling I have as the player. One thing I wanted to say too that you were talking about was kind of the future of this game in live services and where it can go. I tend to believe that this concept that like within the FPS space, that a game can fix itself over time and improve no longer exists. I think there was an era where that was possible. I mean, we have examples, right? Like Siege is one of the great examples of kind of growing over time.
10-year-old game, by the way, but yeah.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. 10 years old. Now in 2026, I just don't find that to be an option. The market's way too competitive. I can go to any other game I want. And so having this sense of like, oh, it'll like get better over time. I don't even know if there's a runway where they can afford to get better over time anymore. I don't find this idea that the FPS game in a live service can actually grow after launch as really any type of strategy or anything to really look at. In my opinion, looking at Highguard and its launch so far is like, it's over. Like it is over for them. Like I don't see how they turn this around. Not only like minus the narrative from like, the really aggressive negative gaming audience, minus that part, I don't see how they can actually improve the game to the point where they can bring back even close to getting 100,000 players again. I just don't see it.
Chris, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I love all the ideas here in the in-round progression. I think, we skipped over the launch a little bit and kind of what is behind, like, why we keep talking about this isn't just what it means for the genre, but the way it got on our radar was that Video Game Awards trailer, right? That was at the end of the Video Game Awards showcase. And everyone was like, what the fuck is this? And you're telling me it's coming out next month? Oh my God. And there was, oh my God, did they pay for the spot? And it turns out Jeff Knightley, who is the host
Healy.
of the Video Game Awards, Healy, thank you. He included it just because he liked it and he wanted to give a smaller studio a boost. There was no money that was changing hands. And so you can imagine, oh my God, we got this, Video Game Awards. And by the way, just, quick side note, the fact that the Video Game Awards can put 100,000 players on a game, whether or not they retain, but at least out of the gate, first on that trailer basically alone, I think is remarkable as a user acquisition source, which is something we're always trying to figure out in HD. In mobile, you can just go out and buy ads, but you can't really do that. And so the fact that we have a new tool in the brand marketing tool bag to get games that people haven't heard about through the Steam funnel, I think is really important. But the other piece is that the game also is by the Respawn team, right? And if you remember how Apex launched, and this was Chris Bruzzo's, he's going to take this one to the grave, Mr. Starbucks himself. His biggest accomplishment was that Apex launched almost with no fanfare. They just dropped it on Steam, right? The thing they just pooped it out. People were like, oh my God. It came out of nowhere. And I have to imagine the team was thinking that they could pull off the same thing, a fresh new concept that no one has really experienced, exciting gameplay, mounts, blow them away with the trailer, and then parlay it into a launch like this. You have to imagine that's what's going on in their head.
Talking to you now on a Wednesday, earlier this week, Chad Grenier and Dusty Welsh of Wildlight spoke with Christopher Dring of the game business. And he did say as much as what you mentioned, where they had a shadow drop for Apex Legends. It did well for them. They wanted to do that route again in 2026. They mentioned the opportunity that came up with Jeff Keighley playing the game. And I do agree with you, Philip, where just like, can you go back to that chart again where you had the player counts? So even from the whatever marketing route they went to using Jeff Keighley and writing on the Game Awards, it still got almost 6 figures worth of players through the door concurrently. So what we're seeing now, its peak versus how many people are playing now on a Wednesday morning, at that point, this is not a marketing issue. At this point, this is now a game issue, if that makes sense, retention-wise.
The team seems to have wanted to shadow drop it. And as you guys mentioned, the team is obviously competent because it's a good game at heart with some challenges they need to address. But I just want to go back to my original point. I think that if their strategy is not to grow it over time, then it's going to be really interesting why they didn't do any tech playtests before. Like, that's the thing. If you look at Arc Raiders, for example, it's had an amazing success. But I think one of the key reasons was that they had at least like 5 or 6 tech playtests for slams, etc. And that's what I'm thinking. I don't think shadow dropping a shooter now is the right way to go. Maybe it was right for Apex for
pre-COVID
that time. We're talking like what, 2018 or 2018? 19. Yeah, I think that time has gone. Like, as you said, Chris, the studios have to think about like runways, keeping the servers running, building gradually the community. The only exception to that is like Valve right now with Deadlock, but Valve is obviously, I don't think you should model your strategy against a company.
A small
like Valve,
independent developer that happens on a platform.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and has infinite money.
Valve is like Nintendo. It's like they're their own monster. Don't look to them for strategies.
Exactly. And I think actually like with enough proper, like look at even Marathon. They delayed the game multiple times because of these tech tests. And I think if Highguard did this instead of shadow dropping, maybe they would have had a stronger launch. That is, I think, the biggest thing. And this is why when I actually liked what they did, that they were receiving a lot of negative media since the launch. So they didn't talk much. They let like the internet deal with itself, and they were like, the game will speak for itself, is kind of what it seemed for me from the outside. But then I think I think that the game is not tested enough on the community to address key issues. And especially when you're doing something like this, you're trying, as you guys mentioned, elements from MOBAs, but there is no PvE elements. There is a little bit of elements of in-game economy that involves buying weapons, a little bit of gear, but doesn't go to the depth of MOBAs. But at the same time, it's not like hero shooters or you're looting weapons. It's a little bit of capture the flag, but it's more about attacking the base. You need to be aware of two bases at the same time without even being able to move on the map from an isometric view. I think it's an interesting set of challenges that I think you need a lot of user data to address. And I think that's my take. So I hope they are able to maintain the game long enough to address the issues with real user data. But I'm with you, Chris. Sides. It's going to be a bit of a interesting challenge for them for a while. I don't see this like spiking up anytime soon, unless they do a major update and they're actually planning a major user acquisition beat. Because actually, a lot of people haven't heard, anecdotally speaking, a lot of people that I've been speaking to haven't heard that it actually released. They just remember the event at the VGA more than the actual release date of the game as well. So maybe they're planning on doing extra user acquisition down the line.
No, the thing for us, you and I have talked about, and I'm curious to get the panel's views on, is that there's this question that seems to be persisting in PC console, which is how you actually figure out if you can launch your game, if you should launch your game, right? What is the right way to do that? In mobile, the path is very clear. It's go to Philippines, go to a tier 2 country. The soft launch KPIs are predictive of global launch. Don't get out of there until you're comfortable with the KPIs. Your CPIs and your LTV are in a good place. All those things are highly predictive. HD does not work like that, or at least, I don't know, people don't seem to think it works like that. Like, you can still do regional launches on Steam. Almost no one does this, but it feels like there's so much brand marketing. Oh my God, it's going to get leaked on Reddit. They're just, the way people get acquired to games in PC console is different than the way people get acquired to mobile. And so what is a PC console developer to do? And the answer seems to be early access, but early access just launch. Who cares?
Yes.
Who cares what the label is? So I don't know how you solve this problem. I don't know what if you guys have different perspectives here, or if there are just bad answers.
Can I give you my quick takes on that? Includes your queries along with what Ross mentioned, Philip. So this is an overall go-to-market challenge. Every game is different. Every market is different. Every game is different. So I mentioned the positives of going through the Jeff Keighley route for announcing your game. The positives is that 100 million people saw the game. There's an activation there. The con of that is you now have outsourced your ability to control the narrative to somebody else. Okay. And I think you mentioned this for us, where they from people were more aware of the VTGA announcements versus the game's release date itself. That's what happens when you outsource your go-to-market to somebody else. What I would have liked to see is a studio having a conversation from day one, or once the trailer launched, with the community, saying, let's build this together. Let's continue the conversations on areas or on forums that we control, that we could really give you and show you what you want to see, show you what we want you to see. Because in my opinion, a function of marketing is the ability to tell your side of the story in your own way. They kind of relinquished control of that. And for a month, nothingness. And I'm going to quote Gabe Newell here. If you don't talk to people, if you don't talk to prospects or potential customers, they are inadvertently, narcissistically damaged by that lack of communication. And so you have to claw your way back on multiple fronts. So to address what Philip mentioned is, how do you do that? That's what the go-to-market strategy. That could be from community management or building a community, or multitude of ways, which I can't fill in right now at the moment, but something is better than nothing.
When I look back at like Marathon's announcements, and I look at like Highguard's, Highguard's was a marketing trailer, not a marketing strategy. And I think that really harmed them. When we announced Marathon, we knew we were years away from launch. And so there was a lot of like concern about like, how do we control that narrative? And so the strategy for Marathon was launch the trailer, launch a Vidoc of us talking about what the game is, which Highguard didn't do until the launch date. I feel like if that video or that live stream happened like right after the live stream, that could have helped them a bit. And then we said, we're going dark. So like there was like a 3-step solution there of like, how do we control this? And of course the Vidoc is like heavily scripted to specifically speak to the information we got from user research about what players would want to know or players would want to think about. So like that was like an overall strategy in order to not create this negative sentiment around Marathon's announce and then us not talking about it for years. Highguard, and to their, like, I think in hindsight, they probably would have gone down the route they did with the Shadow Drop. I mean, I feel like that's kind of obvious. But I also think it would be a little bit challenging if I was the game director of a studio and Jeff Keighley's like, hey, we want to put you at the end of this, massive audience. I think it would be very challenging to say like, no, we're sticking to our guns. And so I don't necessarily think it was a bad decision at the time. I think in hindsight, you can argue it was a bad decision. But I think the real point is like, there was no marketing strategy. I mean, their strategy was to shadow drop. So there was obviously no marketing strategy on their side in the first place. And then putting that trailer out like 6 weeks before launch, it just really, really harmed their ability to manage what players' expectations were.
Mr. Anjos, I think you had a very interesting insight there, which is developing the game with the community, but on platforms you control.
Yes.
Or you control the messaging. What do you mean by that? Is there a material example we could point to of this?
So
that
Discord,
you have in mind?
So Discord is, I think, the go-to, or at least one on top of mind for me, where that gives you the ability to have a server, have a channel, have people there, players there, having events on Discord. Like an example I'm going to give to you right now is that Deadlock Discord. You're going to hear a lot about Deadlock from me if you allow me to. So FYI, is currently not officially announced by Valve at all. The only real existence or acknowledgement that Valve gives to Deadlock is in its Discord channel, which is may or may not be official. But Valve and Deadlock developers are on that Discord channel. There are tens of thousands of people, players on that Discord channel. And from there, his name is, or her name is Yoshi. I don't know if it's a person or not, but that is most likely a Valve employee giving out information, tidbits, and patch notes within that Discord. And the key takeaway there, the value there of having something that massive, is you have the ability to not just control the narrative, not just get the word out, at essentially free. People are doing the work for you. People aren't just making content for you, wonderful works of art, fan art. At the same time, and this is the key thing here, at the same time, having a server of thousands of players and people to mobilize for you, as in, number one, play the game. Tell people to play the game. Make TikToks, make content, advertising, or marketing my game. Getting your friends to download the game and repeating that process again. So the ability to mobilize a community of players, convert them over to another level of the player upsell value chain, and getting them to convert their friends list and the flywheel effect, that is like chef's kiss. Like that is an example that I urge everyone to look into and study very hard.
There's one more I'd like to add into the pile here, which
Please.
I think actually did exactly what you're talking about, Mr. Anjos, which is Mountaintop Studios. Anyone remember Spectre
Yes.
Divide? Also, ex-Respawn. Lee Horn, brilliant individual.
Yes, big fan.
Big fan of what they were trying to accomplish. You remember they were trying to go after tactical shooters, and this is one where you had ghosts of yourself that you kind of play
3v3,
against.
by the way,
And
tactical shooter.
3v3 tactical shooter, and they went through those phases of having closed invite only, they had additional beta launches, they really went through the phases of what you would want them to do in building a relationship with the community and getting feedback. So it felt like they executed against the playbook, and yet the game bombed. And I think really, I would encourage people to listen to what they have to say, which is that they did follow the process, but by their own admission, they weren't good students of the process. They mentioned that the feedback was basically the same across all the different waves, and that they weren't reacting to the feedback. They weren't analyzing the feedback in the proper way. So it's not just, I would argue, about going through these phases. It's also an analytical component of what am I trying to get out of these phases? What do I need to value? I mean, we talk about gates a lot. What do I need to show here? What do I need to show here? What do I need to show here? And the whole point of these feedback phases is to basically get outside your own head, right? Because when you're working on these games, all of it, this is why they hire consultants, right? This is why they hire us, is that we're not in this team's head every single day. And so that gives us a clarity of thought that others don't. And this team, I think, had that, and they just ignored the signs by their own feedback. And I'm not trying to bash them at all. I think they're a very smart group of individuals, but they point to things like low social re-invites, right? Like if the game is really good, you know, people should be inviting it to their friends. They should be retaining. So I agree, like we need a new playbook. I think the early chapters of that playbook are being written, but it's not just a series of bullet points. There's this whole analytical piece I think people need to really think about as they're going through these phases. Like I really don't want to play my own book here, but like, yeah, like bring in a consultant to do a fucking playtest. Like this is the one thing I wish people called me more for, was doing build reviews, right? I don't need to do a consulting sprint with you, but after you launch a big build, like hire someone for like 3 hours. It's not that expensive just to play your game and be like, hey, is this bullshit or not? Like get a diversity of opinions. I hope that team speaks more about their experience too. They're a very smart group of people.
Mountaintop?
Yes.
So real quick comment on Mountaintop, and I'm glad you brought that up. I also had analogs to Mountaintop as I was playing Highguard. PV3 in a shooter is, I haven't really seen that succeed. PV3, that's very popular in MOBA. You have that in Dota. That being said, the hook for Spectre Divide was, I think they even said, who doesn't have two friends? The challenge with that is if one of those people leave the match, it is a huge deficit that you can't crawl your way back from.
I think that applies too to Highguard. Like one player gets killed, it's a huge advantage for the other team. And it's funny, I don't know how the 3-player group thing became so popular, because I remember talking to like a social designer, and they were talking about how like 3 players is almost like a couple and a third wheel. And I tend to agree with that. Like it is weird how we got here, where 3 like is becoming a team. Like Arc Raiders does it. Apex kind of, really was, I mean, probably not the first, but the one that first comes to my head about doing this. But it really is a couple and a third wheel, compared to squads is like 2 couples, something like that. And you can it changes the dynamic a bit. But yeah, I don't know how we got here. I don't know why 3 became the number.
It does, like 3v3 versus another 3v3 is high risk. That's Spectre Divide, that's Highguard. 3v3 versus 3v3 versus another 3v3, that's where I think opportunities for fun could happen. That's what Arc Raiders does. So just throwing that out there. It's just,
what I think when I hear that, it's when when BRs started to be popular. I remember game designers were discussing it quite a bit about like, it's really weird that one person gets to be the winner from 100, or a squad of 3 gets be the winner out of 100 players. Because from a game design perspective, designers back then were optimizing towards winning. And I think what's happening in the last 10 years or so, even when you look at indie games, there's a lot of strong push from players towards the concept of dying is really okay. And I think that's maybe one of the challenges we're seeing. Like if you look at roguelikes, roguelites, etc., the concept of you dying repeatedly, every time you go into a session, you're expecting not to succeed. And these genres of games are quite popular with this generation, and even, I'm sounding a bit old, but also our generation. BRs are about you most likely not succeeding, but it's really fine if you succeed. Extraction shooters are, you want to do your thing and leave, but it's kind of okay if you die. And I think maybe this is what like shooters struggle when they make the games a bit too much about victory these days. I think maybe at least the more recent successful shooters, the goal is not really about winning those games. And then when you get the 3 versus 3 shooter, the goal is to win and to beat the other players, etc. The type of shooter player that's really interested in this fantasy is either already hooked on CSGO for the last 10 years and good luck acquiring that user. And then you have like some of them in maybe in Overwatch, some of them in Battlefield and COD, etc. But I'm not sure if that is what recent players are after. I think they're more looking after games where it is okay to win, but it's not the most important thing. Obviously, you can argue with there's ranked modes in the majority of the games that I'm talking about. Like Apex is a BR, but the ranked mode's quite successful, has a lot of retention, etc. So I'm not saying winning doesn't matter anymore, but I'm seeing players are going towards more experiential shooters rather than skill-based focus on winning shooters.
Attention app and game developers, are you ready to unlock the secrets behind the world's top-performing apps and games? With Sensor Tower, you get the ultimate competitive edge, whether it's breaking into new markets, fine-tuning your UA strategies, or boosting monetization. Dive into data like never before, track global trends across app stores, analyze market-leading in-app purchase and in-app ad strategies, and benchmark your performance with real-time insight. The best part, Sensor Tower doesn't just deliver data, it helps you turn it into action. With intuitive tools and expert analysis, it's everything you need to make smarter, faster decisions. Thousands of app and game studios, from indie creators to global giants, trust Sensor Tower to help them win. So why not you? Start your free trial today at sensortower.com. That is sensortower.com.
So there was a recent tweet by Mr. Cliff Blazinski, the Chainsaw Man himself. And by the way, I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Cliff Blazinski lives in the area, as is Epic Games, and he drives around a lot of sports cars. You can very much see where he is at any one time. And so he tweeted out, "Funny how the extraction shooters have surpassed Battle Royale as the top shooter genre." And Mr. Metaverse himself, Matthew Ball, tweeted back, Garena reports 700 million. I'm going to say that one more time. 700 million quarterly users of Garena Free Fire. Excluding China, PUBG does over 100 million DAU, while the most current estimates for Fortnite and COD Mobile/Warzone at another 150 million MAU. And Matthew concludes by saying, I guess BR dailies clear extraction easily by MAU. And so I think this raises a very interesting question for all of us, which what is the most popular shooters and shooter genres globally?
In the game of growth, everyone is looking for that power-up. Vibes is exactly that. It's built by industry people, so they actually get the challenges you're dealing with. As a result, they become the fastest growing gamified rewards platform out there. And the results are kinda nuts. With their AI-powered targeting, you're not just buying installs, you're bringing in the right players. And now they've got this new ROAS optimization engine, so your campaigns basically level up automatically. Vibes is built different. It's designed for growth. And I guess you could say it's powered by good vibes. Check out their DOF exclusive case studies by following the link in the description and go to vybs.co. That's vybs.co. Share your email and join the waitlist list. Today's podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer, inviting you to dive into their new first-of-its-kind report, The State of Creative Optimization 2025 edition. It's not about how to make creatives. It's about understanding what makes users actually stop scrolling and what emotional and psychological triggers drive performance. Based on over 1 million creative variations and nearly $2.5 billion in ad spend, the insights in the report will help you develop a winning creative strategy. Check out the link in the podcast description below or go to appsflyer.com and search The State of Creative Optimization. That's appsflyer.com.
So I'm gonna answer or respond to you, Philip. At the same time, I'll respond to what Feras touched upon as well, which is the meta topic we should all be looking at and what is the thing to chase. If you look at any breakout genre from Battle Royale or MOBA is my go-to. They share a similar space, a similar history. MOBAs, in my opinion, are in many forms a translation of RTSs. BRs, Battle Royales, are in some way a translation or distillation of arena shooters. 30 years ago, RTSs and arena shooters are what's called, or what, as the kids say, boomer shooters, were the leading genres in their categories. Now they're not so much. They've been eclipsed by MOBAs and Battle Royales. Why? My thesis to that is they share a similar shape of both easy to learn, easy to identify the loop, and with leagues and miles of mastery in each. So I, as an Extraction fan myself, Extraction I don't think will ever eclipse Battle Royales in terms of overall breakout success. What I see here from Matthew Ball is very accurate, just because the accessibility at Battle Royales is almost universal. Not one person who sees or plays a Battle Royale after one session will not understand the game mode and be able to see the fun. Similar to MOBAs as well, if you're into that.
Yeah, but I would agree, because I mean, at the end of the day, Battle Royales, as Feras was talking about earlier, from a roguelike perspective, they are kind of just roguelike FPSs. You know, you start with nothing, you build your way up, you die, you start with nothing, you build, etc. And then you have a chance to win or not. And so I do agree there. Just to defend Cliffy B a bit, I completely disagree with his thought here, although I wish it was true. I disagree with it, but I will say I fall into this trap as well. I think Cliffy B is too PC console Western brained to actually know what the largest genre is. I think a lot of times, I work in, the West. And so a lot of my opinions or data perspective is often tied to Western audiences. And when I look at, the genres, I don't even think about like Free Fire. Like, that's not even in my brain to come up, although it's massive. I mean, it's incredibly massive, but it's just not something there. So I think his perspective is a little bit missing kind of a lot of the genre. Cliffy B made Realm Royale, right, as well? Not Realm Royale, Radical Heights.
Yeah, the desperate.
Yeah, I loved Radical Heights. So I got to defend Cliffy B here for just a little bit, but that's it.
So We're about to show a graph here. It's one of the first graphs I think the world hasn't seen this graph before. World premiere of a graph that combines Sensor Tower data, which covers mobile games, and Video Game Insights, which covers PC console. And this crew in particular cross-pollinates in both genres. There's no PC master race. There's only just games. And I think that is something that's very important to keep in mind. And we're looking at the top games by MAU in the last month, merging those two together. And by far, the one that has the most MAU, and it's not even close, is Free Fire. Free Fire is reporting around 240 million MAU, which easily clears the next biggest game, which is PUBG Mobile. Now, there's a little bit of shenanigans here because PUBG Mobile actually has another SKU that's specific for India. You can see it, it's just below Fortnite. And so if you combine both of them, PUBG Mobile gets a little bit of a boost. And then, of course, there's what happens should we merge franchises together. There's all of those interesting questions. But after you get past Free Fire and PUBG Mobile, it is straight HD. And of course, again, remember Sensor Tower, you don't have China Android numbers, so there's always some asterisks we got to put here. But by and large, I think this helps provide a refreshing view of the top shooters. Counter-Strike 2, top game on PC console, Fortnite is above Counter-Strike, Counter-Strike below it, Call of Duty, PUBG HD, Apex, Battlefield, Rainbow Six Siege X, Marvel Rivals. It's the games that you would expect. Crossfire Legends almost certainly is much popular once we include China Android. And then Valorant Mobile is not reporting a lot of monthly active users, but again, I think that's a data error more than it is anything else. But I found this chart to be really refreshing and help give a new perspective. The thing it does highlight, though, they were talking about earlier, there's two genres in the world, ladies and gentlemen. It is Battle Royale and it's tactical shooters. That's it. That's all that's on this chart, basically. And there's a couple Battlefield games, War Thunder. I don't know if we consider that. It is a shooter. It's not a first-person shooter. And Battlefield. But by and large, like, it's shooters, a Battle Royale flavor and tactical. I don't know. Is anyone else getting anything interesting out of this chart?
I think
nope.
My only issue with this chart is that, so obviously, as Chris mentioned, like all of us in the West, as soon as we see figures that comes from the East, you get mind blown. Like there's games that we even, like for example, if you think of Crossfire, it used to be the most played game in history until League of Legends took over. But I never even played this game in the West. So you don't talk a lot of people that played it. I think it was developed by Smilegate. So I'm not really surprised that at the end of the day, any given genre of any video game, the biggest market, biggest number of players is going to be something that's big in the East, most probably China, right? But I think in terms of scale, let's look at why did Cliff tweet what he tweeted? And I think it's because of the amount of volume that's being generated by commentary from the players and the amount of commentary from the media, etc., about a game such as Arc Raiders. So if we just want to look at MAUs to measure how big a game is, then you'll never see any of those games there. It's impossible. But I actually think we should not also ignore the impact that goes beyond just MAUs. I just wanted to mention that because Cliff most probably tweeted that because he's seeing Arc Raiders everywhere. Last year we saw Helldivers everywhere. Will these games ever have an MAU of BR that is big in China? No way. There's not enough players in all of the West to match that, right? But I think there's some very solid big games that do not hit high MAUs. The second thing is you might have high MAUs, but most probably your game is free to play. A lot of games aren't free to play, will never hit those numbers, but most probably will generate very high revenues. Like Battlefield made a huge amount of money last year, but I don't think we'll ever hit an MAU for a game that's as big in China unless it becomes as big in China. I'm using that as an example. Arc Raid is the same, Helldivers, etc. So I just wanted to point that out. Whenever you look at graphs that has MAU, they will favor free to play, but not necessarily total revenues, will ignore box revenue, etc.
Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe the other point to double down on that for us is that Free Fire is, in some degree, PUBG it's kind of a paper tiger because a lot of those MAU are in India and Brazil, actually, which do not monetize anywhere close to the other titles we're talking about, not even in the stratosphere. That doesn't take away from Free Fire, by the way, which has increasing revenue as a time series. Its growth is impressive. And the other thing that I think we're talking about Battle Royale, we're talking about tactical shooter. There's kind of this dark horse, which is UGC, which is something that, we know Fortnite is pivoting their platform. Free Fire is doing a lot of this. If you guys have been playing any bit of Free Fire, they're doing a lot more sandboxy stuff. Let us play with the rule sets. Don't move geometry, but play with the rule sets. And we know Battlefield Portal, which I logged finally back into Battlefield 6. I got in if my PC crapped out. Battlefield Portal actually took a step back in my view pretty significantly from where it was previously. But there's this idea of kind of UGC in shooters, basically making shooter a platform, which has kind of been floating around. I'm not quite sure we know Halo's the Forge. There's been like kind of like this other idea that I'm not quite sure what to do with it, but it seems like it continues to persist.
I think there's something there for sure with UGC. I think the challenge when we talk about that is, in my opinion, it's the players come first and then UGC comes after. Like, you need that massive player base because, only 1% of them are going to be building stuff. And so in order to get 1% to build stuff for 99%, you need a lot of people. And so I do agree that UGC is like an important aspect here, and definitely these games that are this massive that want to kind of, in a negative way, like offload some of the development to the player base is really, really strong. But I don't find it to be like a launch feature that actually shows any kind of positive impact on the overall product.
Have you guys played Hightail at all?
Hightail, yeah.
One of the most popular mods is a shooter mod, FYI.
Can you tell us more about Hightail?
Real fast, Hightail is germinated from a server in Minecraft. It was a company started making a game called Hightail. It was acquired by Riot Games and then disacquired by Riot Games. The founder created his own launcher, launched the game with his own launcher, so therefore bypassing Steam's 30% cut. At that scale, it matters a lot. The game's doing great, and there's a very vibrant modding community, a modding community that any other game would spend years to get that passionate level of modders making content for it now. Doing very well, by the way. A lot of mods are out there, and the most popular ones are shooters. So give people tools, they'll make shooters.
I mean, the core of the genre to me, like the reason that it's been so successful is that it has a very easy mastery hook, which is that you have to control basically different planes of axes. You have to aim and you have to move. You have to control in that space that I think works really well on both PC and on console with the dual analog sticks. And it's also one of the things, by the way, if you give a controller to someone who hasn't played video games before, that's the thing they struggle with the most. To do with first-person shooters is navigating and those different XYZ planes using the analog sticks. But that's something like, if we just talk about why does anyone give a shit about shooters, it's that fundamentally trying to aim and hit something has a high degree of mastery. Like I think that to me is very different than hacking and slashing or like clicking, the 1 or 2 button on a toolbar in World of Warcraft to summon a spell. Like that core Twitch element has been the fuel for the last 30 years for us? Like that fundamental loop of like aim, shoot, miss, try again, or hit.
Not to mention, it's very intuitive, right? Like you move your cursor around whenever you use your computer. If you're playing a shooter, just move around. As Anjos said, you give the players mods, they're going to make shooters or they're going to make swords. Like the same with kids. You give them a stick, they're just going to start hitting each other with it. Like it's very, very straightforward in my opinion.
Web stores. You've seen what good looks like, but have you seen great? AppCharge is the direct-to-consumer platform backed by the likes of Supercell and built by monetization pros from Moon Active, Playtika, Huge Games, and others. People who know the difference. AppCharge powers over $500 million in transaction a year for top studios, optimizing every detail. Deeply personalized web store offers custom-made design, industry-leading monetization features, in-game payments, SDK, and more. 70% of top grossing games already have a web store, but the ones scaling fastest, they're doing it with AppCharge. Learn more at appcharge.com.
Game devs. Here at Heroic Labs, we know that great gameplay is what players love, but integrating metagame features like challenges, progression, and rewards is crucial for retention and monetization. But coding them is a tedious and time-consuming process. That's why top studios have turned to Hero from Heroic Labs. Hero provides a complete suite of battle-tested metagame features that are quick to implement, letting you spend more time on the core gameplay experience. Ready to ship fully featured engaging games? Check out Hero today at heroiclabs.com.
I have one last opinion that I'm interested in everybody's thoughts here. An opinion I've been thinking about a lot and based on my experience. So I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of kind of, legends in the industry, people that worked on games from like our childhood, the 90s, the early 2000s, etc. And something that I'm finding kind of more annoying over time is as the industry grows, there are becoming more and more people who are ex Apex, who are ex Grand Theft Auto, who are ex these massive titles. And so whenever I see games that it's like, hey, this is made by the ex Apex devs, I don't actually know much about them, so I'm using that as an example, but this isn't meant to be really targeted towards them, is that in my experience, I've worked with a lot of ex, great game here, and a lot of them are really good, and some of them are really bad. And so I don't really understand this kind of marketing narrative of using it, and also suggesting that it actually means that they're going to be successful again in the future. A lot of people made games in the early 2000s that are massive successes that would flop today. And I just kind of wanted to throw that narrative out there that I see all the time. The Highguard one made me think about it, but there's a million of examples. Actually, watching the Game Awards, there was some game that was announced, and it was like from ex lead designer of Red Dead Redemption. And I'm like, dude, that game probably had 100 lead designers on it for like every category. Like, what does that even mean anymore? Like, why is that actually a value from a marketing perspective? And actually, is it a value? Is that kind of like an old thing that we used to say that no longer provides much value from a marketing side? Because I think it alters players' expectations and puts a lot of pressure on the game itself, while also being like, look, we've all worked in this industry with names that people would know, and some of them are really good and some of them are bad. It's just how it is. There's a mix of game developers at all levels.
I'll bite. It's a very interesting question because here's my view on it. I think for people that are working in the industry, obviously, like we've all shipped games that had 600 or 1,000 people on it, and there's very skilled developers and not so skilled, a mix in between. There's even very big names. When you work with them, you learn that like it was most probably the team around them that helped them succeed, etc. So I fully agree that just the name doesn't drive much. But I'm just looking at it from the perspective of the players. I'm going to use, usually people don't like that when you use movies as an analogy when you talk about games. But for me, for example, I'm not like so much into movies these days. But whenever I go and like want to watch something, I check like, is there a Coen Brothers movie that I haven't watched? And they just like pick that out. Or is there a Wes Anderson movie that I haven't watched? And I watch that. And the reason is because I feel specific directors will give me a specific vibe or an experience. And I think leaving the marketing beat on the side, maybe that's what people are after by saying, this game is made by the ex-developers of this. So like even when I played Highguard, the shooting did feel like, okay, the game feels a little bit Apexy. And I think maybe that's what warrants using the names or of the games that the team came from, not from the marketing beat, but to tell the players like, these guys, this team, if they work together on a game, it will feel a little bit like this. Then the other side is obviously the marketing beat, right? This only works, I feel, and maybe it doesn't still work on PC, on console. Like on mobile, like you release a game and you tell them this is from creators of Candy Crush Saga, they don't care. You don't even name the name of the company. They don't care.
I care. You made My Little Pony for us. When are we going to talk about your My Little Pony free-to-play game? I care.
Hey, I made Minions Paradise, all right?
It's such a good game. But I think on PC, it still matters a little bit from, on console, it still matters from an equivalent. It has its weight, but I think the more it's being used, it's dropping a bit. And at the end of the day, even if you use it as a marketing beat, the players are going to play the game and decide for themselves. So it can create unrealistic expectations of some stuff. Like maybe, for example, for Highguard, it's a totally different game than Titanfall. And maybe players expected another Titanfall and now they're disappointed. I don't know that right now. So it's a very interesting question, Chris.
And it's an important question too. And if I can just give you like this very quickly, a lot of it is branding, a lot of it is marketing, a lot of it is brand equity. So everyone here, I would call hardcore gamers. We are, I think, up the chain of what you would call hardcore gamers, but the money is in the casual gamers. And the casual gamers may know about Call of Duty. They may know about Apex Legends. And if you're marketing a new game, you need something emotional to hook them in. So there's value. I'm not saying I agree with it, but there's value to why developers and marketers will do that.
Yeah, it's a good point too, because when I would tell people I worked at Bungie, they'd be like, oh, Halo. And I'm like, bro, Bungie hasn't owned the Halo IP for how many years now? Like they didn't think Destiny. There were some people that of course thought Destiny, but the casual audience would always think about Halo.
That's where the money
So
is,
yeah,
man.
that's an interesting thought.
But there's something I think that that there's an insight here, and it's something that I combine with something that Gabe Leiden, who's the founder of Machine Zone, pointed out. And he was on Twitter one day and he was trying to figure out like who are the best game designers, right? And no one can answer that question because there's like 500 people that work on a game and you're not quite sure who is responsible for what. Like a director has a very singular point of view. Exactly. You know who Wes Anderson is the brand. You know, Kojima is like the closest we can get. Cliffy B was there for a hot moment, but even he didn't have much of a brand, right? Like after he left Gears, I don't think anything he did, I'd be like, oh man, that's a Cliffy B game. And so it's very hard to figure out in these organizations who's good and who's bad, who's responsible. I mean, we were going through this whole VC phase, right? Of all these ex-Riot, ex-Blizzard people raising funds. And it's like, oh yeah, I was the QA manager, and not to take anything away from QA, but like, you know, that's different than being the creative director on a product. And I think it's very hard to figure that out. And I think we need to figure out how we can figure that out, because it would benefit everyone to know who's responsible for what. And it's always not a clear sight. It never is in movies either, by the way. But I think that's just a labor problem that remains to be solved. The fact that we don't know who the best designers are outside of a couple broad voices like Ben Brode, you know, Mark Rosenwater over at at Wizards of the Coast. Vince, of course, rest in peace, good Vince. I mean, we didn't get a chance to talk about Vince last podcast and his legacy, which, I mean, hopefully we'll get a chance to do that next cast. In fact, let's do that next cast. But, Vince going and starting Respawn, I mean, there was a very clear straight line between Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 and Titanfall. I mean, just straight line. It's because he brought the whole fucking studio with him, right? To start Respawn. But I agree with you. Like, what does the lead designer of Red Dead Redemption mean? That doesn't mean shit. Doesn't mean I'm getting a cowboy game with like a $1 billion budget and shark cards. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one person of like thousands of people. It is weird. I don't know. I think I just started to get, working in the industry, maybe I'm just more sensitive to it, but it is just kind of frustrating when we use these like this major game person. Like, it feels like it takes away from a lot of the rest of the team. I don't know. It bothers me a bit, not only from a marketing perspective, but also just like a sentiment perspective.
Agreed. Okay. Shooter Monthly episode 4 in the can. Boom, boom. Cock. Woohoo.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.